The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is considered by many as the greatest Western movie of all time, even though Once Upon a Time in the West also has a claim to that title, particularly amongst critics. Both movies were directed by legendary filmmaker Sergio Leone, who no doubt must have enjoyed seeing critics argue over the two. One of the stars of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was Clint Eastwood, but what many people may not be aware of is how close the film came to not even starring him. Join us as we take a look at why the Hollywood superstar didn't want to be a part of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Clint Eastwood didn't want to share the screen with two other big names. By the mid-60s, Clint Eastwood's career was already packed with westerns. Understandably, the Hollywood star was looking to do something new and refreshing. This is likely one of the reasons that when asked to appear in the movie, he originally declined. But his issues didn't stop there. He was disappointed to find out he'd be sharing the screen with two big actors, Eli Wallach and Lee Van Cleef, who had already co-starred with Eastwood in For a Few Dollars More. In Eastwood's view, the increasing reliance on an ensemble was crowding him out of the movie. This issue was escalated by the fact that Wallach's character had been given all the juicier dialogue. Production was delayed because of Clint's salary demands. When Eastwood originally decided to star in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the third film in what's now known as the Dollars Trilogy, he was disappointed after reading the script and discovering he'd be sharing the screen with two other major players. The issue was a big enough one that negotiations for the third film fell apart, and Eastwood's agents and publicists had to work incredibly hard to bring him back to production. What's most interesting is that because the films had not come out in America, Eastwood was not yet the huge star that we know him to be today. This means he had less negotiating pull than people would expect. With the tenacity and hard work of his agents, they were ultimately able to get Eastwood a $250,000 salary for the film. It might not seem like a lot by today's standards, but that was actually more than the entire budget of A Fistful of Dollars. He was also given 10% of profits when the film was released in America, and he was promised a new Ferrari 275 GTB. He accepted the job. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Now, back to more interesting behind-the-scenes facts about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Clint Eastwood didn't enjoy smoking cigars. Throughout the movie, Eastwood's man-with-no-name character is recognizable for the little cigars he's constantly smoking, and you'd think he'd been doing it all his life, but in reality, the actor really hated them. Sergio Leone, the director, was famous for being a perfectionist who liked doing multiple takes. This led to Eastwood having to smoke countless cigars over and over again, and frankly, it disgusted him. He even went as far as to issue Leone an ultimatum. The actor told him he'd better film the cigar shots right the first time or he'd quit. Luckily, it never came to this, and the result was an all-time Western classic. Clint Eastwood turned down Once Upon a Time in the West. By the end of production on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Eastwood was done working with Leone. The famous perfectionism of the director proved not to fit with Eastwood's disposition, and the actor resolved he would form his own company and start making his own movies. Leone, on the other hand, wasn't necessarily done with Eastwood. He even flew to LA and pitched Eastwood on the role of harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West. Eastwood wasn't interested, and the role was played to perfection by Charles Bronson. Once Upon a Time in the West has become a classic of the genre, appearing on prominent all-time critics lists, including Time's 100 Greatest Lists of the 20th Century. The movie is considered a landmark Sergio Leone spaghetti western masterpiece featuring a classic Morricone score. They had to film the bridge explosion twice. For the scene in which Eastwood and Wallach's characters decide to blow up the bridge that leads to the cemetery where they believe the gold is buried, the production hired hundreds of Spanish soldiers to stand in for Civil War soldiers. It was an incredibly complicated setup, as the soldiers all had to be in the right, safe place, and Leone set up several cameras to film the moment. Sticking to his well-known perfectionist style, he was determined to wait as long as it took for the perfect light to capture the explosion. As the two actors, Eastwood and Wallach, watched from a nearby hilltop, the same hilltop where Eastwood apparently practiced his golf swing, Leone watched the sky, waiting for the right light. The word "vaya" was the very specific signal to blow up the bridge, and the crew gave a Spanish officer the honor of igniting the blast. Unfortunately, a member of the crew tried to hurry a cameraman. While doing so, he said "vaya." The officer heard the word and blew up the bridge. The special effects expert who accidentally triggered the explosion with his words was quick to flee the set. Leone looked over the mistake and simply said, "Let's go eat." The bridge had to be rebuilt and the scene was reshot, driving up the budget of the film. Eli Wallach was almost seriously injured 3 times. While Clint Eastwood may have had the hardest time deciding whether to be a part of the movie, it was Wallach who had the hardest time during the shoot. For the scene in which he's about to be hanged while sitting atop a horse, with the idea that the horse would be ushered away, thus leaving him to hang, Eastwood was supposed to fire a rifle at the rope. A small explosive charge in the rope would detonate, freeing Wallach. What Leone and everyone on set didn't count on was that the horse would be spooked by the sound of the rifle. As Eastwood fired the gun, the horse took off at a dead gallop with Wallach still on its back and hands tied. Wallach recalled the horse took him a mile before it stopped. Another incident occurred during the scene in which Wallach's character cuts his handcuffs under a moving train to escape Union captivity. Leone once again demonstrated his perfectionism by wanting to make sure the audience saw Wallach himself, not a stuntman, lying beside the train as it sped by. Wallach agreed to do the stunt how his director wanted, but he realized after the first take that a metal step affixed to one of the cars had missed his head by inches. He realized if he had raised his head 4 or 5 inches more, he'd have been decapitated. Wallach's troubles weren't done there, as during the film's climax when his character unearths the gold hidden in the cemetery, the crew applied acid to one of the bags of gold, so that when Wallach hit it with his shovel, it was guaranteed to split open on cue. What they didn't explain to the actor, however, was that they were keeping the acid in a bottle that once held a brand of lemon soda Wallach enjoyed. Wallach saw the bottle and took a sip, thinking it was his favorite drink. Luckily, he realized his mistake before it was too late, avoiding a truly horrendous and tragic accident. Now it's time to hear from you. Were Clint Eastwood's issues with the good, the bad, and the ugly justified, or should he have been more grateful to be a part of a now classic Western? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.